Hey, you! Oh, crap. Yeah, you. Let's talk about mentality. With any mind sport beyond just competitive programming, such as chess and even school and learning stuff, yeah, I would count those as mind sports too, it's so easy to associate skill in that sport with your actual intelligence. And it makes sense to do that, right? Well, no, not really, because any failure in said sport is going to feel totally personal, and it's just going to suck. But your skill in a sport is just that, your skill in that sport. And it reflects little on anything else about you. Like seriously, you're worth so much more than your skill in some sport or game. It's really just a trap to do this, to associate your intelligence or ego or worth as a person with any kind of mental sport like this. And this video is going to be about some very dangerous mentalities that spawn from mental traps like those, serving as both a warning and advice for how to get out of them. So let me describe these mentalities. First, any kind of self-deprecation is harmful. If you tell yourself something enough times, you're going to start to believe it, regardless of how you actually feel about it. And when you think you're stupid or inadequate for not having success or being good at something, you're pinning the blame on your self-worth and intelligence. But this doesn't make sense, because your performance in anything is only a measure of how good you are at that particular thing. So it doesn't make sense to attack your self-worth because of some performance, since the only thing that performance measures are your skills or knowledge, which you do have the ability to change. So put the blame on those, and then fix them. A tangentially related issue is comparing yourself to other people. Of course, these comparisons are bad for you, and your experience is going to be different from those around you, and oftentimes others can and will do better. But it doesn't matter. You're really only up against yourself, and thinking about the progress of others is only going to be a distraction, because it's not going to help you with your own progress. And something else that's not going to help you is thinking that there's some uncontrollable, external factor stopping you from being able to achieve what you want. For example, I hear people say that their brain isn't wired to do, say, math, or that everything they do depends on luck, or there's some system that's biased against them. And these can be true, sometimes, but there's no way they're always true, and that means you should focus on when it isn't true and focus on what you can control. In psychology, this is called an external locus of control, where you essentially blame the external things for having control over your life instead of yourself and what you're doing about it. And of course, it's bad. A very common instance I see of that is people saying they're always going to be bad at something because they're new to it. And I mean, it's a reasonable thought process initially, but not when you have it all the time. So sure, you're new. Okay, then learn stuff and stop being new. Otherwise, you're never going to stop being new. If you don't know something, the reason is that you don't know it. Leave it at that so you don't trap yourself in a mental ditch that you can't get out of. The final issue is the idea of doing something purely to get good at it, to get good results, and being happy only when you do get good results. And it's fine to have goals for something, but if you only enjoy something when you're constantly getting better, you're going to be very disappointed when you don't. And you can't always be going up, so there's going to be some disappointment. To remedy that, you've got to find some enjoyment in the process of improving and practicing and getting better. The results are going to disappoint you from time to time, but the process never ends. And if you enjoy that, you'll always be able to find some enjoyment in the activity. Now, those are the main things to look out for, and they're all just really toxic thoughts to have, especially the heavy self-deprecation. Now, I wanted to share my story of experiencing this with competitive programming as well, since it's a huge part of what inspired me to make this video. And some of these may seem like absurd thoughts, but I don't really care. This can happen to anyone, and it's never absurd to realize it and take care of yourself. So let's start with the time I was in the 1800 region in Upper Expert on Code Forces. It was only about a month and a half, but every contest stung worse and worse. Each time I made some new kind of stupid mistake, and for whatever reason I took each one super personally. I felt like I had to be perfect, and with each mistake I was just letting myself down. And there was nothing I could do but be disappointed, because there was always just disappointment. All I wanted was results, to break the purple barrier in every contest, and I failed. It was a lot more painful than it may have looked if you just look at the graph, because it was only a month's time. But even after breaking purple, I still had this toxic mentality with me, and it just led to more disappointment later. A much longer time period is when I was orange and trying to get red. And this time it was even worse, and it was a longer time period as well. I was looking at other people who had gotten to red quickly, and I just convinced myself that I was stupid for still being orange because these people had been in orange for a shorter time, and they're doing what I can't. So even after only being there for a few months, I felt like I would never get to red. I just didn't have what it takes, or whatever it was. And in my journey video, I talked about just brushing off some of these failures, but that was really far from the truth. The hardest hitting one was my biggest rating loss, which was a devastating minus 166. And that one was just unbelievably painful. I even went to Code Chef and did contests there just to try and make up from the pain from that loss. And a hint, it didn't really help, because you can't solve one problem by creating a bigger one to distract yourself. And the thing that I guess I consider my biggest failure, since it was probably what I put the most effort into, a brief summary of how this works: there's a big international high school programming competition called the IOI. In the US, to qualify for it, you do a series of 4 contests on a site called USICO, and the best performers from that go to the USICO training camp, and the best performers at camp go to IOI. But in 2020, all I wanted was to get to camp. And obviously, because this is a story and a video about failure, I didn't make it. I'd just screwed up the second and third contests and knew even before the fourth that I had no chance. Which kind of just rubbed it in, because I had this whole 5-hour contest that I was doing, and I knew it would be pointless, and it was just kind of a reminder of my past failures. And this is the worst part. While camp was happening at that time, I did a few Code Chef contests, and I got my first red color, which was 7-star on Code Chef. It was one of my best achievements even until now. But instead of celebrating it, all I could think about was how I wasted that good performance, and how it could have been put to better use, getting me to camp and giving me a good score in camp. And you see how the mind can just twist your achievements and turn them against you? I did this thing that was definitely worth being proud of, but I only used it to make my past failure feel even worse. And all this felt normal to me. They were just my thoughts. But looking back on it, yeah, it was awful. So I'm asking you now to look back on the thoughts that you've had. Are you being toxic to yourself, and are you trapped in one of these mindsets? And if you are, watch on to find out what I think you can do about it. Now, there's a lot of relevant science here. You may or may not have heard of the science of the growth mindset, and well, it's incredibly relevant. Because if you believe that you're naturally incapable or bad, and that there's nothing you can do about it, and you have some of these mentalities that I mentioned before, then of course you aren't going to get anything done about it, because you're telling yourself you're not going to be able to get anything done about it. Even your own brain isn't on your side. How are you going to do anything? And this is called a fixed mindset. It means that you believe your capabilities are fixed and you can't change them. And the opposite is a growth mindset, where your time goes into analyzing your mistakes, not getting too hung up in success, and constantly trying to improve. And the science says, as you'd probably expect, the growth mindset is just better. Because if you have a fixed mindset, you've convinced yourself that there's not much you can do about your situation. And you'll naturally put less effort into it, because you're kind of demotivated from the start. But a growth mindset means you're not taking things personally, and you're focusing on improvement rather than dwelling on results. Which happens to align exactly with what I mentioned before. Go figure. So what does the growth mindset teach us? There are 2 main things. And the first is that you can do anything. Like really. You might not be a born genius at something, but it's possible to get good at anything with enough hard work. And if you think you're inherently bad at something, it just means you don't have those skills or knowledge yet. There's no inherentness to it. If you were to actually put the time into learning it, you would no longer be inherently bad at it, you'd just be good at it. And you can improve in anything, not just knowledge, but also your learning, and your improvement of learning, and your improvement of your improvement of learning, and however many derivatives you want to take. So with time and effort, you can even out any natural disadvantage you may have. And this is important to keep in mind, because it shows that eventually everything's on you. If you're not able to do something, it means the only thing you can possibly blame is your strategy and the way you're practicing or learning it. But you can change your strategy. So the whole point is to shift the blame towards the things that you can actually change, and then change them to best suit what you want to do. And the other thing is how you should handle failure. And I think the best way to handle it is to treat it as feedback. Again, your failure reflects a lack of knowledge, skills, or a bad strategy. The first 2 things you can improve, and the last is something you can easily change. So there's no need to treat failure as a judgment of your character, because again, it's not. It doesn't say that there's something wrong with you, only your strategy or your knowledge. So use failure to tell you what you're bad at or what you're doing wrong. Then fix it. That's it. And growth isn't linear. Plateauing at something may seem like constant failure, but all it means is that you've hit a hard wall and you need to figure out what to do next to break through it. So now the hard part. If you believe in all the stuff I said, but you're already stuck in the mindset, how do you fight it? Or how do you combat these thoughts in the first place? And well, it's not easy. It's a process, and the first thing you have to do is stop the already existing negativity. You probably won't believe in it the first time, but if you never let yourself get away with unreasonably dumping on yourself, your thoughts can gradually change to more positive ones because you're blocking out the negative ones. So think about the thoughts you have and the way you've been thinking about yourself. If you identify any bad things, tell yourself the opposite and balance it out. Look out for these things from time to time to make sure you aren't building up a bad mentality over time and trapping yourself. It's all gradual. You can become bad gradually, or you can fight off the badness gradually. So fight it off bit by bit and be consistent. And like everything else, you'll eventually learn to get over it. And remember, you don't deserve to be attacked by harsh thoughts, even by your own internal monologue. Nobody gets to talk to you that way, not even yourself. So I hope you can learn something from this video. Hopefully you haven't ever experienced this. That's the best case scenario. But if you have, there's still hope. You just have to be actively aware and fighting it. So I'm going to be doing a lot of things with this channel soon, and more videos on mental health stuff like this is a part of that. So if you like the idea of this video, give it a like so I know it's good. Really, it's like my only form of feedback besides commenting and subscribing, which you could also consider doing, but liking is easy. So yeah, and other than that, that's it. Goodbye.